Uh, hey friends, so there was some network issue with me. Sorry for that. And myself and Faisal was trying to sort it out. And for all those who doesn't know, today's guest is Faisal Ismail. So Faisal, can you start with a small introduction about yourself and we'll directly go?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me, Hamas. It's a huge pleasure. Um, so a
Before
little bit about
coming.
me. Originally from South Africa, now based in the United States. I say I was back and forth until COVID, but now I'm just based in one place. Yeah, I've been in wildlife photography for many years. Not enough yet, but many years. And got my start out in conservation. I actually worked in wildlife conservation for a very long time, and I knew that what I saw was the way people connected with nature, especially now in a lot of people are very disconnected from nature, and a way you could have people reconnect with nature is by creating these amazing photographs and stories for them that make them want to go out there and spend time, and with that it
Yeah.
allows you to bridge this gap between people and nature, and hopefully by them just like loving your photographs and the work, the creative work you put out there, it creates a connection where they want to go out and protect these environments and all the animals that live out there as well.
Mhm.
um, yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Again, just love photography, love just creating stories, um, and just being connected with nature.
Yeah. So let's
So I think we lost we lost Hummus again. He's having a lot of connectivity issues, but I'm going to keep going. Try and get the presentation underway, and hopefully he can pick up again. So one thing I wanted to kind of focus on or talk a bit about today is uh, wildlife photography on foot versus a safari vehicle. And I know Hummus is having connectivity issues, but I hope you can all see my screen. And these are two very different ways of photographing wildlife. And I know a lot of people photograph from a safari vehicle, and a lot of people photograph from um, while being on foot. And there's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong way, and there's no one is better than the other. It's just two different mediums or different ways to approach wildlife and photograph wildlife. Um, and I'm going to try and go through just a few of the different elements that are involved in both of them. Again, it's a very a topic we can discuss at length, but obviously, we only have 30 minutes today to discuss it. So I try to narrow it down to just a few things that I thought were fundamental differences and advantages with both, and some disadvantages that both have. So the first thing I wanted to cover was advantages and disadvantages, right? So the first thing is it's obviously the kind of game, the kind of wildlife you can approach, and that's a very big thing to take into consideration when you do compare these two things, right? Photographing on foot versus photographing on from a safari vehicle. So photographing from a safari vehicle, the one biggest advantage by far that outweighs the others is you can approach really dangerous wildlife or dangerous game uh, at a relative safety and from very close range, right? So you'll see a lot of this when you are photographing, for example, in Africa, when you're on a safari, and that photographing from a safari vehicle is the norm over there, because there's a lot of really dangerous game, big predators, even big plains game, that being in a vehicle allows you to approach very closely and very safely, right? So it's a huge advantage. Also, a lot of times the wildlife in these reserves, they desensitize to the vehicles, so they pretty much ignore the vehicles. So for the most part, you're getting pretty natural behavior from them, right? They're ignoring the vehicle, so you're pretty safe and you can approach them closely, but yet you're still getting these really natural encounters, and that's a huge advantage when you are photographing from a safari vehicle. Um, Now, on the other hand, one of the advantages when you are photographing on foot is you can approach a lot of wildlife in very intimate settings, right? You can get access to a lot of areas where what you can't get access to from a vehicle, and you can, again, like I said, you can create these really compelling real stories or images, because you can approach wildlife very intimately in their own environment, and that's also a huge advantage. It also gives you a true sense of the environment that you are in, and it allows you to create these really interesting compositions in it when you are photographing. And again, big advantage is you can approach wildlife or photograph wildlife. I shouldn't say approach. You can photograph wildlife uh, in areas and conditions that sometimes you can't get to with a vehicle, right? So you can get to really remote areas. You can get through really tough terrain on foot that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get to a vehicle. And again, it gives you the advantage of um, capturing these images that are not necessarily images that are just out there for everyone to see, right? So that again's another fundamental difference is when you do photograph from a safari vehicle, chances are that there are a number of other people capturing similar, that are on the safari vehicle, or a number of other safari vehicles around there. So they are capturing similar images to what you're producing or capturing in that moment, right? Now, again, the difference is when you do track wildlife on foot, when you do go photograph on foot, there are many instances where you're out there by yourself. And so the images you're capturing, that they're pretty unique, in the sense that there's not many times a lot of people around you that have hiked out with you in that. So a big advantage uh, over there. Another advantage, I should say, with when you do photograph from a safari vehicle is the ability to take a lot of gear with you, right? So you have a vehicle that you can carry large amounts of gear, which allows you to change your techniques or change your methods while at a sighting, right? So that's a huge advantage, just the ability to take all this gear with you. Usually when you are photographing on foot, when you're hiking out to go photograph wildlife, you don't have that luxury. You usually have to take just the essentials of what you need. You kind of have to pre-plan your shot or have an idea of the kind of photograph you want to capture while you're out there, and you have to plan for that, right? So a lot of times it's what you can carry in your hand and fit in your backpack that you can take out there when you are on foot. Now this is not necessarily advantages or disadvantages, but the other thing to consider when you are photographing from a vehicle versus photographing on foot is the kind of equipment that you'll need. So um, when you're photographing from a safari vehicle, you usually you have a platform to photograph on. You have a platform to put your camera on. All you really need is a beanbag, right? You really just need a beanbag. Sometimes you don't even need that. You could, essentially place your camera on your knee and still get pretty sturdy shots. And the difference is obviously when you are photographing on foot, you do need other equipment that you wouldn't necessarily need, in the sense of you would need a tripod, uh, definitely a light tripod. You probably need a gimbal as well. Um, Again, just because the difference is when you come to any good sighting, like anyone knows, is that usually the more time you spend out at a sighting, regardless of whether you are on foot or on a vehicle, the better your chance of capturing really interesting images. And so the time investment is the big thing. Now, obviously, when you're in the vehicle, it's really easy. You can put your camera on the seat next to you. When the moment happens, everything is ready. You just put on your beanbag. You can even just lay the camera, have it sit on the beanbag, and you're ready to photograph. Now, when you photographing on foot, you can't hold, if you're going to be out there 1, 2, or 3 hours, you can't really hold your camera that entire time. So things like a tripod, gimbal, a ball head, those things are really essential to photographing on foot. Really, really important. There are times when I do take a beanbag with me as well, especially if I want to try and capture really, really low angles. I place my camera on the floor, lie down and photograph. But a lot of considerations to take into account when choosing gear. Knowing if you're going to have a photograph on foot or I'll be in a safari vehicle most of the time. It's fundamental differences that will play a big part in the kind of images you capture. But yeah, there's just a little bit of an intro of the kind of the advantages and disadvantages when photographing from a vehicle versus photographing on foot. Now, let me go to the next one here. So the next thing is your ability to storytell, right? Good storytelling and giving yourself the opportunity to tell effective and really compelling stories with your photography. Now, in my experience, and again, I'm sure there's a million different opinions on this, but I've found that I'm able to create a lot more compelling stories when I am photographing on foot, and that's just in my experience, right? I before I ever loved photography, I loved wildlife and I loved nature, and so I just love being in that environment. And when you don't have the protection of a safari vehicle, when you don't have the confines of a safari vehicle, when you are out there in the dirt, in the grass, in the snow. You kind of become one with that environment, right? You're fully exposed, and I feel that translates into the photographs that you are taking. And so I really love photographing on foot. Now I totally understand, when especially if you're photographing in places like in Africa, you don't have the total luxury of just going everywhere and photographing it. So there's obviously some places you can do that, and a lot of times, however, you have to stay in a vehicle because of the nature of some of the wildlife, right? And I totally get that. But I've definitely found that I really enjoy just photographing of hiking out there, again, because it allows you to find those moments that you might be the only one at a sighting for many hours, and inherently because of that, you are going to capture images that no one else is going to have, because there's no one else at that sighting with you, right? And a lot of times, the reason for that is it is really, really tough to hike out with your gear and to track animals on foot, and again, just getting access to these areas on foot. It is physically demanding, so a lot of times people shy away from that, and that allows you to create these really, really intimate stories. Like both the images I have up here, I know for a fact that there weren't huge crowds over there, and there weren't other people over there, and so they make them really special to me, because those are just really, really intimate moments with me, and just these incredible animals, right, in these incredible wildernesses. And again, it's that feeling of even though a safari vehicle is open, and it's there's no roof and stuff like that, it's a completely open vehicle, there's still you're still shielded and you're still protected by the thought of being in a safari vehicle, right? While when you're on foot, again, completely exposed to not just the wildlife, but to the elements as well, right? So there's mud to walk through, there's your shoes get wet, your socks get wet, can get cold, sometimes you're sitting out there for hours. And I think, again, all that really, really, I think it translates into really compelling storytelling. And that ultimately is what I feel wildlife photography is all about. What we all strive for, basically, is not just to take pretty pictures, but to take pictures that really tell these really, really interesting stories, these dynamic stories. And the other thing also is it allows you to adjust quickly, right? So when you are photographing on foot, it's really easy to, if you want to change composition of a shot, it's really easy to just move 2 or 3 feet, as opposed to if you're in a safari vehicle, it's a little more, effort can be done, but again, it just takes a little more effort to do. But yeah, I definitely, I enjoy both, obviously, but I definitely am drawn to photographing on foot just because of the storytelling aspect. whenever I'm processing these images, when I'm done, it always takes me back to those moments of when now sitting in the mountains, or sitting deep in the snow, or whatever the case may be. But again, and because of that, I feel because of that, I have a connection to those images. They're not just pretty pictures to me. I have a real sense of how that image is taken, where I was, how I felt, how cold it was, and I feel that translates in the image as well. I become invested in the image because I'm part of that image, right? I was part of that environment. So definitely, I think photographing on foot has, for me at least, has the up on storytelling. The next thing is compelling photographs, right? So again, when now, not to say that you can't take compelling photographs from a vehicle. You definitely can. I'll show you that in a little bit. But again, just an ability to get these incredible angles or these incredible intimate scenes with wildlife allows you to create these compelling photographs, right? And that's what we should all go for. Again, not just pictures are really, really pretty. Those are really amazing in their own right. But when you create when you find these really interesting angles to photograph on and create different compositions, it creates really interesting photographs, right? And compelling photographs. Now, these photographs might not be the most liked or anything on Instagram, but the value of or the impact of a photograph is not how many likes it gets on Instagram. It's what emotions or what thought that photograph evokes, right? And I feel when you are able to photograph on foot, just the way you can approach or photograph wildlife can create a lot more compelling photographs than simply photograph. And when I say a safari vehicle, I don't just mean the safari vehicles in Africa. I mean, if photographing from any vehicle, right? Even in North America, you go to a lot of parks, you can photograph a lot of wildlife just from your vehicle. But when you photograph on foot, when you really get into the elements, you're able to create these really, really interesting and compelling photographs. Like if you take this coyote, for example, if I were to photograph him from a vehicle, this exact scene, I would be photographing down on him because he was so low to the ground. And it would have been a great picture, but it would just show a coyote walking through the snow, right? But on the other hand, being on foot, getting out of the vehicle, and being extremely low to the ground, I was lying down on the floor when I took this photograph, and I was shooting actually through a little snowbank in front of me. And what that does is it shows him at his level, at his eye level, walking through this thick snow, and as the wind's blowing by, picking up little snow, dusting up little snow around him. It creates this really, again, compelling photographs. And it's just those little things. Just the change of angle, right? From shooting up to shooting like right at eye level, even lower than eye level. And you can do that a lot easier when you are on foot photographing. Let me keep going. Okay. Again, the next thing is it's along the same lines, right? Is just compelling photographs and compelling perspective, right? When you photograph on foot, you can get these really great angles and really, really cool perspectives. Just like this bison over here. I was able to actually get lower down than this bison. So I was lower, way lower than his eye level when I photographed him. But that allowed me to get this really, really cool perspective of him with the mountains behind him, almost looking down on me, right? So it was almost like one of those remote camera shots, except it wasn't, right? It was handheld shot. But being on foot, I was able to crouch down lower than what he was. So that's another big thing for me is, again, just these really cool perspectives that I try and get. Now, obviously, I also just love straight photographs that are just really beautiful. But for me, the ones that just really stand out are ones that have a really compelling perspective that make me just look twice at the photograph. I think that's right now for me more important than again taking just the same old pretty picture over and over and over again, right? Because like for example, I've photographed bison, many bison. I love, they're one of my favorite things to photograph. I think that they such interesting animals, and the different colors and tones and um, that they have allows you to create these really cool images. But because I've photographed so many bison, now I'm always looking for new ways to photograph bison, right? New compositions, interesting compositions, things that um, I have never seen before, or images that I've never taken before. And the only way for me to do that right now is to photograph them on foot. And I think that's a big thing for me. It's a huge selling point when I think about when I see bison and I'm in a vehicle. I always try and find the safest way to approach them, photograph them on foot, because definitely looking for these really compelling photographs. Like this one here again, this image in particular. uh, you know, if I would photograph the same image, and if I was not lower down, if I was standing up or in a vehicle, what I would get was I would photograph this bison standing in this exact position, but behind him might have been the valley behind him would have just been plain white snow and stuff like that, and I'd be looking down on him, so I wouldn't get that gaze from his eye as well. But just changing that simple angle, and again, my own positioning, going lower down, I'm able to get this gaze where he's kind of looking down towards me with all the mountains at the back, right? So it's just those simple things that when you're on foot, it does help you create those images and those perspectives. Um, Now, again, I'm sure everyone, whoever's listening to this might be thinking, man, yeah, Faisal just he only likes photographing on foot, doesn't like photographing from a vehicle. And that's so far from the truth. I obviously love photographing from a vehicle because it has some really huge advantages photographing from a vehicle. And one of them is, again, you can approach really dangerous subjects and really dangerous scenes, right? That from a vehicle that you could never get, or you could never photograph these scenes on foot. It would just not be possible, right? So huge advantages also from photographing from a vehicle. You can approach and photograph many different and dangerous scenes that you wouldn't be able to necessarily photograph while on foot. Like obviously, you know, wouldn't be able to walk up or walk close to a male lion, carrying his kill if I was on foot. It just would not be possible, right? So again, that's a huge advantage when photographing from a vehicle. And these are all things you have to consider when you are going on a photographic safari, or you're going on to photograph whatever subjects you are going to photograph. I think it's important to keep these things in mind beforehand, right? It's research is very important, right? If you go out and as a wildlife photographer, and you're just ready to, you're like, I'm just going to photograph whatever comes my way, you might get some really good pictures through that. But when you really plan ahead and you really think about the kind of images you do want to create, right? It allows you to prepare. Uh, it allows you to prepare for that photographic safari or whatever you want to photograph, but also mentally prepares you and allows you to create these really compelling images, right? Because you kind of do your research, do your preparations for the kind of photographs you want to create. Now, nature is super unpredictable, so you can prepare all you want, but the sighting might never happen, or that moment might never happen. But when you do prepare for it, you and that moment does present itself, you're ready for it, right? And where I'm going with this is, again, it comes on to what kind of gear you want to pack, where you're going, the locations you're going, the type of game over there, and that will dictate a lot of how you photograph, whether you are going to be photographing from a vehicle, or whether you can photograph on foot, right? These are important things to know beforehand, right? Because it takes me back to what I said early on, is that if you're going to a reserve anywhere in the world where they do allow you to photograph on foot, then okay, I would need to pack a tripod. I would need this. I would need a beanbag. I'd need if you're photographing on foot, a lot of times you need a longer lens, right? Because again, you can't approach wildlife as close as you would in a vehicle. So these are all things that help you prepare, right? So if, for example, if I'm going to the Sabi Sands in South Africa, I know that, okay, I can approach wildlife and approach the scenes from a few feet away, and I wouldn't really need a long lens for that, right? A short lens, and I'd be able to capture those really great images. But I know, like, if I was going somewhere like Yellowstone, right, for example, I know that, okay, I'll be photographing on foot a lot. I can't necessarily just walk up within a few feet to a bison or a wolf or something like that. So I need a longer lens, right? So those things all help me prepare. Um, but again, when you do photograph from a vehicle, you have these huge advantages of of being able to approach really dangerous situations and subjects, which these situations and subjects, inherently make really compelling photographs and really, really great imagery. um, but you only are able to capture these if you obviously are in a vehicle. And that's the main thing to consider is, no matter where you're photographing from, vehicle or on foot, is first and foremost, safety should always be on your mind, right? I know it's great to capture really, really crazy scenes or crazy images, but more important that is to remember, your safety directly impacts the safety of others if there's other people with you, but it also directly impacts the safety of that animal, right? So putting yourself in harm's way just for a photograph inherently puts that animal in harm's way as well. So just to keep that in mind whenever whichever way you do photograph, whether it's on foot or whether it's on vehicle, and make sure that you obey the rules and just keep it extremely safe. And that's the most important thing. Um, the other thing I had on here is mobility, right? So, um, this is it's an interesting one, but I would have to say, photographing from a vehicle, you are you are able to be a lot more mobile in the sense that you can travel to different sightings relatively quickly, right? So you might be at one place, looking at, I don't know, waiting for something to happen, but then you get a call that, hey, 4 miles down here, lions have made a kill. It's really easy for you to, just drive down there real quick or head that way, and uh, again, it gives you access to a vast area of wilderness a lot faster than if you're on foot, right? And that's a huge advantage from being in a vehicle, right? You have access to a lot more really quickly. So you can go from sighting to sighting really quickly. Now, on foot, the difference is, the disadvantage is you kind of invested in what you're doing at that moment, right? So if you hike out 2 miles with your gear through some thick snow, and you come across some bison or whatever it is, coyote or fox hunting, and you're in thick snow and it took you an hour or whatever to get out there with all your gear, you kind of invested in that scene, right? So you kind of out there. It's very difficult, it's very tiring to, if someone tells you, hey, 3 miles down this way there's something else, it's a real gamble, because you're on foot. It's going to take you a while to walk back to your vehicle, back up, and get to another sighting, which might be gone by the time you get there. Also, you'll probably be exhausted. So that's a huge advantage when photographing from a vehicle, is that just the access to a vast area really, really quickly and relatively easily. But again, yeah, there's I don't know. Let me see. I don't know if we still lost. I don't know if we still lost Hermes on this, but yeah, there's again a lot of advantages and disadvantages to both. The key is to just remember, like I said, to do your research. Research the place that you're going, what's available to you, the types of photography that's available to you, and more importantly is to try and think ahead to the kind of images you want to create, right? Because that dictates how you approach your photography and how you approach wildlife, how you approach the scene. Um, Again, whichever way you're photographing, whether it's on foot or whether it's from a vehicle, think, and just think further than just the pretty picture. Try and create compelling compositions and photographs. And yeah, just always make sure you have the right gear with you. And when I talk about the right gear, I don't just mean camera gear. I mean a lot of the right gear, right? So, like, for example, when you're photographing on foot, and you're in Yellowstone and it's winter and the temperature is negative 20 degrees Celsius, your hands are going to freeze up, and and any of you follow me, so pictures of me with my beard frozen up, my eyelashes freezing together, and you want to make sure you're warm and you're comfortable as can be. You have clothes that your gear and your clothes that withstand the elements. So think of all of these things ahead of time, and definitely if you are used to photographing from a vehicle, I would definitely encourage you to find areas or find a wilderness that allows you a reserve that allows you to photograph on foot, and definitely give it a shot and try it out. It is something that becomes very addicting. Really connects you with nature. So definitely try and give it a shot. And you don't have to, when you start out photographing on foot, you don't have to go and photograph big animals like bison and stuff. Photographing on foot, you could go out and go to your local park also and photograph birds and things like that. And it's really it really connects you, and in turn connects your photography to your subject and to nature. And I think it like I said, it creates more compelling stories in your photographs, and not necessarily even just compelling stories for other people or for your audience. It creates compelling stories for you, and that's the most important thing, for you to be connected to nature and for you to be connected to your photography. And photographing on foot, I feel definitely does that. But again, there are times when photographing from the vehicle is the best and the only option as well. Now I know we are out of time, and I'm not sure if Hermes was able to join us again, but I want to thank everyone for everyone who did join or was able to join. I can't see that on my end, but thanks again. If you have any questions about this topic or about this, or even just have some thoughts that you think I missed or you'd like to enlighten me on, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram, and I'll be more than happy to chat with you and connect with you that way. But again, thanks everyone for joining. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. I don't know if you'd be able to connect with me this way. If Hermes, he's the host of the call. But again, if you do have any questions, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram, and be more than happy to connect with you that way. I hope you enjoyed this one. But thanks everyone for joining.